My name is Lieutenant Amy Carter. I've served in the United States Air Force for just over 12 years, and I've walked into combat zones quieter than my brother's wedding reception. The moment I stepped through the doors of that country club ballroom, all eyes didn't just turn, they measured, judged, and quietly dismissed. I wore my formal dress blues. No sequins, no heels, no attempt to soften who I am. The sharp creases in my pants, the ribbons on my chest, the insignia at my collar, all of it stood in quiet defiance of what this crowd expected from me. Most of them probably hoped I would tone it down, maybe wear something softer, smile a little more, and not remind everyone that I chose a life that didn't involve Sunday brunches and Pinterest weddings. I caught a few glances, the kind that flick across your face and then drop like you're an eyesore in the family album. I hadn't brought anyone. Not a plus one, not even a friend from the base. Part of it was logistics. Mostly, I didn't want to explain why I had to rehearse the difference between small talk and debriefing just to survive a 3-hour event with people who never really saw me. My mother had called me 2 nights before. She asked if I would consider wearing something a little more festive. She used that word like it could erase years of distance between us. I told her I'd be there in full uniform, and there was a long silence on the line before she said, "I just want this day to go smoothly." Smooth, in her dictionary, meant no questions, no tension, no mention of deployments, medals, or the fact that her only daughter had chosen to lead airmen instead of raise children. I'd accepted a long time ago that my career made her uncomfortable in ways she never learned to hide. My younger brother Josh was the golden child, always was. He played varsity football, married a sweet kindergarten teacher, and bought a house 10 minutes from our parents. His life looked exactly like what my mother had dreamed for me, wrapped neatly in someone else's choices. I wasn't resentful of Josh. He did what made him happy. But I knew the contrast made me the outlier, the one they couldn't explain to neighbors without shrugging or lowering their voice. I used to wonder if they ever bragged about me the way they bragged about his lawn or his dog's Halloween costume. As I walked further into the room, the music dipped for a second, just long enough for the subtle pause in conversation to stretch into something awkward. I heard someone say, "Is she in the military?" or something. Like the ribbons on my chest were costume jewelry. I found my table near the back, a couple of rows from the rest of the family. My name card was printed correctly, but placed at the end of the table like an afterthought. It was a small detail, but it spoke louder than any welcome hug. No one asked about my last deployment. No one mentioned the time I briefed a NATO command. They asked if I'd thought about settling down. If I was still moving around so much, I answered politely. Smiled when necessary. But every moment felt like walking on eggshells I didn't break. I wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of being the version of myself that needed to shrink to fit their comfort zone. Wearing my uniform wasn't just about pride. It was about refusing to apologize for how I lived my life. That night, I didn't walk into a family celebration. I walked into a performance, a pageant I was never cast for. But I showed up anyway. Not for them, for me. The cocktail hour was a maze of sequins, polished nails, and conversations about home renovations. I moved through it slowly, not really blending in, not really trying to. My name got whispered more than it got spoken. Like I was some awkward footnote people didn't know how to place. My Aunt Lillian spotted me first. She gave me that tight-lipped smile women reserve for people they think are brave but weird. She said I looked strong, then paused too long before adding, "In a good way." I nodded, thanked her, and excused myself to grab a drink I didn't want. At the bar, my cousin's wife leaned in and asked if I'd ever thought of doing something more stable. I told her I had dental insurance and 2 retirement plans. She laughed, then blinked like she didn't get the joke. It didn't stop. A family friend I barely remembered asked if I was dating anyone, then followed up with a playful nudge. "You're not getting any younger," she said, as if I wasn't acutely aware of my own age every time I walked into a room like this. My sister-in-law, Rachel, pulled me aside near the gift table. She whispered that she had told the photographer not to focus too much on candid shots of me. Not in a rude way, she said, but it just didn't match the aesthetic. I told her I understood. I didn't. Later, my mother approached with 2 glasses of champagne. She handed me one, glanced down at my uniform, and asked if I'd ever wear a dress again. I said, maybe. She told me it might soften the way people saw me. I smiled with my mouth, not my eyes. Through it all, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't roll my eyes. I'd learned a long time ago that silence wasn't always surrender. Sometimes it was armor. They didn't mean to be cruel, not directly. That's the thing about families. The hurt doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it shows up dressed like concern or buried under small talk. What they didn't see was the pride I carried underneath the wool of that uniform, the weight of responsibility I wore like second skin. They saw medals and formality. I saw years of sacrifice, of holding it together for people who'd never ask what that actually cost. And I kept smiling. Not because I needed to, but because I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me bend. Their words didn't break me. They never had. But that didn't mean they didn't leave marks. I was halfway through a watered-down club soda, watching the room from my corner table, when I saw him stand. General Richard Hamilton, 4 stars, retired, still sharper than any uniform in the room. His name was etched into Pentagon walls and whispered through corridors where real decisions got made. He moved slowly, not because he was old, but because he didn't need to rush. Every step had weight. The kind of authority that didn't need announcing. I recognized him immediately. I'd seen him once, years ago, briefing a joint task force. His posture hadn't changed. Neither had the way a room adjusted itself around his presence. People started to notice. One by one. Voices dipped. Forks paused. Chairs shifted. It was like the atmosphere itself pulled tighter. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't making a toast. He wasn't walking toward the couple or the family table. He was coming toward me. My first thought was that it couldn't be. That maybe he was heading for the bar, or maybe someone had dropped something. But his eyes were locked on mine, steady, certain. I sat up straighter, unsure if I should stand or stay seated. A part of me braced for something I couldn't name. Another part already knew it was coming. Around us, the room kept quieting. Conversations dropped off mid-sentence. Even the band missed their cue. I could feel my mother watching, confused. Rachel froze with a canapé, halfway to her mouth. He was 10 feet away now. Still walking, still silent, and for the first time all night, every single person in that room was looking in my direction. General Hamilton stopped just in front of me. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, without a word, he brought his hand to his brow in a crisp salute. It wasn't casual or ceremonial. It was precise, military, personal. I stood. Reflex, taking over before thought could. I returned the salute, not even fully sure what was happening yet. But I felt the shift, the way silence thickened into something weightier. He lowered his hand slowly, then turned to face the room. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like a command post briefing. He said my name, my rank. Then he said, "This woman pulled 2 soldiers out of a burning convoy in Helmand Province after an IED strike. One of them was my godson." There was a pause, long and heavy, the kind of silence that doesn't just land at roots. He went on, said I had made decisions under fire that most people couldn't make with a 5-year plan and a boardroom, that I didn't wait for backup. I became it. Every head had turned by then, forks down, phones still. Someone gasped when he said the convoy had been ambushed, that I dragged a man 300 yards under open fire to the evac point. He said I didn't just serve. I led. I bled. I saved lives when everyone said not to, and that anyone in this room who didn't already know my name should start learning it now. When he turned back to me, his face had softened just slightly. He said, "Lieutenant Carter, permission to thank you in front of witnesses." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He held out his hand. I shook it, my grip steady despite everything inside me shaking. The room erupted into applause. Not the kind that starts out polite and dies in awkward waves. This was real. Raw. People who had dismissed me minutes ago now stood. Some even looked ashamed. My mother had tears in her eyes. My brother's jaw was tight. Rachel looked like the floor had just vanished beneath her heels. But I didn't look at them. I stood there, in the center of it all. Not as someone's daughter, or sibling, or cautionary tale. I stood as the woman who had just been saluted by a general, and for the first time in a long time, I let that be enough. The reception had started to lose its sparkle by the time I made my way to the edge of the terrace. People were dancing again, cautiously at first, like the mood had to be rebuilt from scratch. I stayed near the back, watching the night fold in on itself, still wearing my uniform-like armor that had finally been acknowledged. I wasn't hiding. I just needed air, space to let my lungs catch up with what had happened. Then I saw her. My mother stood by the glass doors for a while before she took a step outside. She held her clutch like it might anchor her. Her heels clicked softly on the stone, slower than usual. When she reached me, she didn't speak right away. Her eyes were rimmed red, but there were no tears. Just something unsettled sitting in her throat. "You looked beautiful tonight," she said. Her voice was thin, like it had traveled a long way to reach me. I nodded, unsure what to do with the compliment. She added that she didn't know. About the convoy. About General Hamilton. About any of it. I told her I wasn't surprised. She flinched at that. Not dramatically, just enough for me to know it landed. Then, she looked at me and said, "I didn't understand what your life really was." I let the words settle between us. For years, I'd wanted her to say something like that. Not to apologize, but to acknowledge the gap between us. I told her she never asked, that every time I tried to explain what I did, she'd change the subject or offer some soft comment about how dangerous it all sounded. She said it scared her, that she didn't know how to be proud and afraid at the same time. I said maybe she didn't have to be either. Maybe she just had to listen. She nodded, slow and quiet. Like maybe, finally, she would. There was a long pause, one of those stretches of silence that doesn't need filling. Then she reached out and touched my arm. Not quite a hug, more like a question. I let her hand rest there for a moment. Not forgiveness, not closure, just contact. We stood there until the music drifted out from the ballroom again. She whispered that she was proud of me. I asked her why now. She didn't answer, just looked away and said she was trying. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like something I could believe. I left the reception without saying goodbye to most of them. There was nothing left to explain. No reason to linger in a room that had only seen me after someone else forced them to look. The valet handed me my keys like I was someone important, not just someone in uniform. The drive was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need music to fill the silence. The stillness felt earned. I replayed the salute in my mind, not because I wanted to relive the moment, but because it had finally put something to rest. For years, I had walked into rooms hoping to be understood. That night, I realized I had been hoping for the wrong kind of recognition. My mother's words echoed faintly, not heavy, just present. She was trying, and that was more than I ever expected. Maybe it was a beginning, maybe it wasn't. But for once, it wasn't mine to chase. At a red light, I checked my phone. One message, from General Hamilton. He thanked me again and said we'd talk soon. There was a program being launched through the Pentagon. Something new, something bold. He wanted me to help lead it. I didn't smile. Not the way people expect when you get good news. I just felt steady, grounded, like something inside me had finally clicked back into place. Approval never built my foundation, and it sure as hell didn't carry me through the hardest parts of my life. I survived those nights on instinct, grit, and the quiet belief that I didn't need to be understood to be whole. I looked out the windshield at the dark stretch of road ahead. It didn't feel empty. It felt open. I didn't know exactly where I was headed next, but I knew it would be mine. Every Mile. They could keep their photo albums and curated milestones. I had something else. Peace. Direction. My name. Unfiltered. That night didn't make me into someone new. It reminded me of who I'd always been. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to catch up.